Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining Resilient Georgia and the Center for Interrelational Science in Pediatrics. This is a community resiliency model introduction and overview. We are really excited to welcome you. It's a pretty quick hour, but we'll invite some participation. You can feel free to put responses in the chat or the Q&A. And also, if there's time, we'll even invite a few people on audio. So I am here today. My name is Jordan Murphy, and I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner working in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm also a community resiliency model teacher, and I've been teaching this model for the last 6 years to diverse groups all over Georgia and in other parts of the country as well. And I'm joined here with Bria. Would you like to introduce yourself also?
Good morning. So my name is Bria Davis. I am starting out in my social work sort of career and a lot of experiences in shelters. So I've been teaching CRIM for about 3 years, and all of my experience examples are going to come from working in shelters and just dealing with life over the last couple of years and how it's increased my compassion for self. Definitely. Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Bria. So this session, as you know, this is day one of Compassion Con, and we are focusing on compassion for self. And we'll talk about that as we go through some of the wellness skills that we will cover. But kind of one of the themes for this particular overview is cultivating compassion across Georgia. So I first want to give you just an overview of what Resilient Georgia is working toward. So in this workshop, and we'll have the opportunity to do a little bit of practice, but we'll learn just one of the ways that Resilient Georgia is building bridges between public and private partners across the state to create an integrated behavioral health network of services and resources for Georgia's children, as well as their families. Resilient Georgia is very much committed to increasing awareness around adverse childhood experiences, but also giving all of us practical tools for managing our own wellness and introducing wellness skills to other partnered organizations across the state. But how are we going to do that? One way is that building a resilient Georgia takes each one of us working together. So the model that we'll introduce you to today, it's being introduced to Resilient Georgia partners all over the state. We're very excited about that. And we hope that even by the end of this 1 hour overview, you might find it to be useful in your organizations and the context in which you work and live in your communities. So let's jump right in. We'll have a few opportunities throughout this session to practice a few wellness skills of the community resiliency model. And I'll start calling it CRIM for short as we go throughout this presentation. But the community resiliency model, or CRIM, we really consider this as a way to increase access to wellness skills, to support the workforce, to support children, individuals, as well as families. CRIM is a set of 6 wellness skills, and we'll talk a lot about the biology of the nervous system. This model has been used across cultures, races, ages, as well as languages. The model's translated in more than 15 languages. We do consider this model as helping with sustainable behavioral health integration, which is one of the roles that Resilient Georgia plays, is integrated behavioral health. This model can be introduced easily, quickly. I used it in primary care during those 15-minute well visits. And also the language of the model does help to reduce stigma. And we hope that as we talk through some of this model, that you'll find that it is destigmatizing as well. So here's kind of an overview of the community resiliency model. As I mentioned, we'll focus on the biology of the nervous system. But we'll also have an opportunity to talk about what are those common human reactions to stress. How does it affect our mind, our body, our spirit? Most importantly, we hope that the main takeaway from this session is that you will learn how to read your own nervous system. You'll learn about your resilience zone. You'll learn when might be a good time to choose a wellness skill if you get, as we say, bumped out of your resilience zone. Again, feel free to put questions into the chat box, and we'll try to answer and respond to those as we go along. So let's just start with a perspective shift. The conventional approach to discussing challenging topics like behavioral health, mental health, substance use, primarily was built on assumption. Kind of this assumption that people are bad, they need to be punished. Oftentimes we're asking questions such as, what's wrong with you? Which is lacking in compassion if we think about that question. Resilient Georgia and partnered organizations are really committed to moving toward a trauma-informed approach, which has a lot to do with awareness. Awareness gives us this idea that people are in fact suffering. People need to learn skills, but also they need to learn how trauma impacts a child's and an adult's development. When we think about awareness, we're asking different questions like, what happened to you? But we also want to take that next action step. We want to be resiliency informed. We understand that people are in fact resilient. We also know that people can learn skills of well-being. Those skills can be cultivated. Those skills can help us to reduce personal suffering and also help to reduce suffering of others. So in this model, we ask different questions. What is right about you? What are your strengths? The community resiliency model is both trauma and resiliency informed. And in this context, we're gonna explore ways that we can increase compassion for self. So let's just start with a quick interactive question, and feel free to put your responses in the chat box, or if you would like to come on audio, we can do that as well. What or who uplifts you? What or who gives you strength? What or who helps you get through hard times?
This is like a webinar, and it takes a second for sometimes people to put things in the chat box. I'll say that one of my favorite answers always comes with pets, because it reminds me of my own little fur babies, but that they can be really uplifting for lots of people. They're almost just like family for a lot of us.
You know, I had the same idea. I was going to say my dog, and hopefully he won't bark during the session, but yeah, just sort of unconditional love, right? Whenever you get home, even I saw this cute little meme that said, came home and the dog had like all these like, welcome home, everything. And the thing said, I just went to the mailbox. And I think I'm going to add to that and say my sister. I have a lot of people around me that are really wonderful, but she just has a very calm personality, and she listens, and she's very supportive. And so sometimes I just call her and say, can I just vent for a minute? She's like, okay. So she's kind of my partner in crime from my childhood.
Very nice.
For me, the first thing that popped in my head is what I haven't done this morning since it's Compassion Con, my quiet time in the morning where I read my Bible, I pray, I write out my prayers, and that alone time is mandatory, and I probably should have done that today, but of course I didn't because we're here. And I think another person would be Leanne. We work as partners at Compassionate Atlanta, and you know, like we're doing Compassion Con, it can get stressful, but when I know she's stressed, I pick her up. When she knows I'm stressed, I pick, you know, it's like, okay, forget the stress. We as people are more important. And then my sister, just like Leanne said, I have 2 dogs in the house right now. I'm dog sitting. That is a huge piece for me. And just the love of friends. Like I really have good people in my life. So I'm grateful for that.
Wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. And I see Michelle also put in the chat box, my children and friends. So as we're sharing, you see that there's lots of head nods and smiles, and many of us have similar resources. So perhaps it's a very special or close relationship, or it's a fur baby, or perhaps it's the work that we do in our communities to support and strengthen those who need resources. Another question, as we think about resiliency and we think also about compassion, what is your definition of resiliency, and or what is your definition of community resiliency?
I'll jump in. I think for community resiliency, I would say the ability to weather a storm, and maybe this is individual as well, and through whatever process, come out on the other side okay. Whatever that means, okay. It may not be as good as before, but at least you've sort of survived. And for people, individuals, I'd say the same thing.
I think when I think about community resiliency, I think about opportunities such as Compassion Con, and where we can share our resources. We can share the things that are working in our communities, and perhaps another community will decide to do the same or to replicate what is working. I also see in the chat box, individual and community resiliency, having the resources and access to weather a crisis. Thank you for sharing.
So when I think of resiliency, I think of the ability to bounce back. However, what I don't like with the word resilient is the fact that you almost think like there's this standard, I was there before and I have to get back to that standard. But when you really go through things, right, even as a community or as an individual, those hard knocks of life, you're not the same, but you do have a bounce back to joy and love and strong, healthy relationships, even though there's a change in the dynamic, right? So that's the piece about resiliency I think a lot of people like to miss. And if you don't embrace that this thing has changed your life, then are you really bouncing back? You know, are you really reclaiming your life? So that's that one. Community resiliency, I'm from Africa, and what I find is this idea of you're never alone. No matter what it is you're going through, your family, your friends, they feel like they're going through it with you as a community. So I think, for instance, right where we are right now, politically with polarization, for instance, we're not alone. Like, I think my mind keeps going back to something like Katrina. They were not alone. So many people were going through the same agony. We just had this shooting in Buffalo and another one in California. We're not alone, even though they're horrible things. And with Compassion Con, we're trying to get ourselves to turn to each other and understand even the stranger is part of your resiliency, part of your ability to be in community.
Thank you all for sharing. So let's start with just the foundational image of the community resiliency model, or CRIM, and that's the resilient zone. You can call it the okay zone, the zone of well-being. I work with a lot of youth who call it their swag zone. So you can kind of call it whatever works for you, but it's the point at which you feel at your best self. And this can change every day. And so we think of this image as a daily use image, a daily check-in. Where am I today? Am I within my resilient zone? The blue lines represent our capacity. What's my capacity for today? Is it wide or is it narrow? And then the red line is the ebb and flow of our nervous system. So throughout the day, our nervous system gives us energy and it takes away energy. And that's the red line, the upswing that you see. It's giving us energy and taking away energy. And this is what keeps us balanced throughout the day. And the CRIM wellness skills help us to widen our resilient zone. Bria, anything you want to add with this?
That our resilience zone narrows anytime we're uncomfortable. So if you're too hot, too cold, hungry, in pain, those things all narrow our zone, and we end up being a little more irritable or just not acting ourselves when we get pushed out. So encouraging compassion for yourself, be aware if you're hot, cold, uncomfortable in any sort of way, and that may change how you react to things.
Yes. Okay, Bria, I'm gonna do the same.
So inside of your okay zone, we call it your okay zone because you can have any emotion throughout the day. In fact, your emotions can change from 1 minute to the other depending on what's going on with you. So you may start off your day excited and then hear some news that makes you a little worried, maybe takes a little energy away from you. Maybe the news resolves itself and you can relax, or it ends up being a sad thing. And then afterwards you're angry or happy. Your emotions can change throughout the day, but as long as you're within your capacity to control what you're doing, to feel like your body is still working with you, you're still in your okay zone. You can be sad, but as long as your body is not as long as you feel like your body is working with you to resolve the sadness or get you through your grief, you haven't left your zone yet. So next slide. So what happens when we get outside of our zone? We know when we get outside of our zone because our body starts, we might experience physical sensations that are unpleasant and our reactions become different, uncomfortable, not pleasant for other people to experience either. So when we get stuck in the high zone, our nervous system is just giving us energy. It's got the accelerator on, it doesn't know when to stop yet. And so that can feel like irritability. It can make you anxious or look like panic. You can have a lot of angry outbursts, physical pain or emotional pain. Night terrors are common in children. If a child has already been potty trained, they might relapse and go back into day or night accidents. Or if we get into older adults, your body also changes when you get older, and being in your high zone can cause that as well. So this is uncomfortable. The main point is that when we are outside of our zone, in the high zone or in the low zone, you react in ways that you may not otherwise. In the low zone, your body is not giving you that energy. So it looks more like depression, sadness. You may isolate yourself, become fatigued or feel exhausted, feel numb in certain areas as your circulation's just not as good. You can withdraw or become clingy. It just depends on who you are as a person when we try to access more of that energy in our body. So no matter which way you go, if you get stuck outside your zone, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And one thing that's important about this image too is that it helps to neutralize the conversation around mental and behavioral health, because we're talking about our nervous system here. We can all get stuck outside in our high zone or stuck in our low zone. Our nervous system has given us too much energy, and it's difficult to manage that energy. Or perhaps we don't have enough energy to carry out our daily task. And also, I think it's really helpful because we know not every culture or every group wants to talk about those big words like depression or anxiety, or maybe even has a word in their language for anxiety or depression. And so this model brings it back to the body. What's going on in our bodies when we are stressed? And that helps us to open up conversation. Also, know that being stuck may mean being stuck for a few hours. It may mean being stuck for days, months, sometimes years. So we know with adverse childhood experiences, many individuals who have a long history of facing really difficult things may find that they are more often in their high and low zone and less often in their resilient zone. So with the CRIM model, we have skills, we have wellness skills, again, that will help widen our resilient zone so we stay there a little bit longer. So when we are in our high and low zone, we want to tell you just a little bit about the biology of that. So when we get stuck in the high zone, our sympathetic nervous system, or the accelerator of our nervous system, goes into full gear. So our breathing increases, our heart rate increases, blood pressure and stress hormones also increase. Our body is gearing up and giving us energy to respond to a threat. On the opposite end, we have the parasympathetic, or the brakes of the nervous system. And the brakes of the nervous system does just the opposite. It helps prepare our bodies for rest. Our breathing decreases, heart rate decreases, blood pressure and stress hormones also decrease. So we're able to rest and digest. So the wellness skills really help us to kick on the brakes of the nervous system. Oftentimes we notice physical pain more often, but it may be a little bit more difficult for us to be intentional about checking in with our nervous system. When is the brakes on? When am I resting? When am I digesting? When are my stress hormones coming down and my breathing has decreased? So the wellness skills help us to kick on the brake of the nervous system, but most importantly, they first help us to recognize when the accelerator might be on or when the brake may be on for too long. So another opportunity for us to participate in chat or on audio. When we are in the high or the low zone, what are some of those common reactions that we all might experience? You could think about some examples from physical, emotional, spiritual, relational, behavioral, or thinking.
Are you asking us that question?
I reach for the sweets.
Yeah.
Like the previous slide, when you said you're at rest and your digestion goes down, was it down or up? The digestion.
When you are at rest, when your brake of the nervous system is on, you rest and digest. So you're eating more. But it's important to know that it's different for different people. Sometimes we eat more, sometimes we eat less.
I don't eat sweets, but when I'm really stressed, I'm like sweets. So my digestion or desire, I guess, goes up.
Yes.
When I'm stressed.
Yes, such an important distinction because everyone's nervous system is a little bit different. So when we think about certain behaviors, like if we are in our high or low zone, some people may eat more, some may eat less. Some may sleep more, some may sleep less. What are some of the emotional responses in the high or low zone?
Before you say that, one thing that occurred to me in the behavioral is when I'm super stressed, I know to like go get a massage. When COVID happened, I live alone. I started dog sitting and the dogs would cuddle up because I couldn't go hugging. I'm a hugger. I couldn't go hugging the whole world. So the dogs, my brain soothed, really did. It really helped. Emotional, I get jittery. I start shaking my leg. Remember, I get like that. I don't sleep as well or as long. I may sleep deeply, but maybe 4 or 5 hours instead of 7, 8, because my brain is churning. Emotional, I'm just on, like focused, like this kind of stress, something like compassion con. I'm too much in a tunnel. I'm not taking care of my relationships. It was my sister's birthday, I didn't call. I'm not, so I stay in the zone. I'm thinking of other types of strains too. I can get to anger before depression. So I may lash out and, but then after a while, the depression and anxiety, I do have those feelings with physical reactions.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. So there are all sorts of common reactions that we have. Perhaps we cry more, or we have sort of these thought patterns that are different in our high or low zone. Perhaps we use substances to get us back into our resilient zone because it's so uncomfortable. and physically uncomfortable to be outside of our resilient zone. Perhaps we isolate ourselves, or perhaps we cling to others to help support us through difficult times. So I'm going to show a list, and this is not an exhaustive list. But when we are in our high or low zone, it is very common for any of us to experience any number of these thinking, emotional, physical, spiritual, behavioral, relationship related outcomes. Now, I know for me in particular, I could probably pick out different things on this list, and it varies depending on if I'm in a high zone state or a low zone state. So the point of this slide here is to increase compassion for self, right? It's physically uncomfortable to be outside of our resilient zone. We would do anything to get back into our resilient zone. And so these behaviors, we can decrease our own judgment for ourselves and also for others because they are in fact so common. So with the community resiliency model, we have the opportunity to recognize what usually bumps me outside of my resilient zone. So I have just two general examples here, and I'll just kind of talk through the first one. So a little bump might be too many chores, right? So if I have too many chores to do, if my house is too messy, perhaps that might send me into my high zone and I become a little bit more irritable. Or perhaps if I feel too overwhelmed with the tasks that I have to do for the day on top of chores, I may withdraw. I may go more into my low zone. So one thing that this model helps us with is recognizing what bumps us into our high or low zone. It helps us to identify the zone that we go into. And then what is our own common reaction? Another example is a challenging day at work. We know that nationwide, many of us are experiencing burnout and work is challenging. And so it can be helpful to notice that on certain days at work, what zone do I find myself in? What's my common reaction? How might others respond to me as well? But then really the key point here is, what are we going to do about it? If I identify that I'm in my high or low zone, what will I do about it? So we're going to introduce you to some wellness skills. Now, the fun thing here is that we're just going to do a brief overview. We'll also show you some resources at the end to help reinforce these skills after this training. But the goal here is that we are trying to cultivate compassion one step at a time. So maybe that means learning one wellness skill for the week and practicing it and seeing if it works. And if it works, keep using it. If it doesn't, we can find another wellness skill. So as we get into the wellness skills, I want to kind of set the stage and let's think about our different portals of awareness. So we have our thinking brain, we have our emotional brain, we have our survival brain. Now, typically, if I were to ask someone, how are you doing today? Oftentimes we get responses like, I'm doing fine, I'm great. We get a lot of thought-based or feeling-based responses. We're adults. We like to be cognitive. We like to think about our thoughts and talk about our emotions. We don't often talk about our sensations. So with our sensations, if we think about sight, sound, touch, smell, and hearing, we have a new portal of awareness. We can tap into sensations that are physical, and that can help to rebalance our nervous system when we use some of the wellness skills. So here are the three, and this is very simplified, but the three-part brain model. This is Dan Siegel's hand brain model. And I'm just going to demonstrate it really quickly. At the bottom, we have our survival brain. This is really helpful when we think about our just typical fight, flight, or freeze responses when we are stressed. Also importantly, note here at the bottom, you see that the survival brain responds to sensation. That's that new portal of awareness that we'll talk about. This is the limbic area, the emotional brain. The emotional brain houses our memories, our attachments to our relationships. It also helps us to assess threats in our environment. Lastly, we have our cortex thinking brain. Turn it to the side, kind of looks like a brain. But our cortex thinking brain helps us to integrate all three parts of our brain. When we are in our resilient zone, all three parts typically work well together. When we are stressed, when we are in our high or low zone, the lower parts of our brain tend to dominate and it kicks our thinking brain offline. So we no longer are responding from our best self. So the wellness skills help us to balance our survival brain and also in many ways get our thinking brain back online. Here's an overview of the skills. There's tracking. Tracking is reading sensations. That's that survival brain. There are 6 wellness skills. Tracking is used with all 5 of the wellness skills. Resourcing, grounding, gesturing, help now, shift and stay. We'll have just enough time to breeze through and give you an overview of these skills. All right. So for starters, actually, Bree, would you like to do this one?
Sure. So we know that tracking our nervous system really helps us understand where our body's at because of experiments, researches that we use to base our studies off of. So this was a research done with over 700 participants, 2 different languages, the participants are from 2 different continents. I think it's Europe and Asia. The specific directions and where in Europe and Asia, don't ask me right now. But it basically, the people self-reported where they felt activation in their body when connected with different emotions that are supposed to be brought up through a stimuli. So you watch something or read something that's supposed to make you angry or happy. Where do you feel that anger or that happiness land in your body? What does that do physically to your body? And which one of those things come first? So right now we're still trying to figure out, we think it might be sensations come first. But notice that whenever we show this, people relate to it. What does happiness feel like in your body? For me, it definitely feels like my entire face is activated. I might have a smile on my face that I can't seem to wipe away, or I feel warm in my chest or in my face. And you hear these sort of things when we talk about stories or the way that we explain how we feel. When we're sad, you see people kind of drag their limbs, that blue being a lack of activation in this. You can just imagine how someone who is sad looks. Like they look as if their limbs are harder to control, or as if they just don't move as much, while someone who might be angry moves their arms and their torso more so, might feel that sort of energy in their hand. You can see the fists sort of ball up. So no matter what your life experiences are, no matter what language you speak, we all have a nervous system, and our nervous system is directly connected to how we experience things in life. So paying attention to the sensations that come up through our nervous system can really help us connect better to our own wellness and tell where we are at any given moment. Am I angry right now? Did I even know I was angry before? Or did it take me noticing that I was balling my hands or that I was getting really warm in my upper chest to know that I need to do something to calm down, that my nervous system is letting me know that I have, starting to reach maybe the top of my resilience zone. Next slide, I think.
So as Bria mentioned, every emotion has a corresponding physical sensation in the body. So we have to learn a new language. How do we describe those sensations? Here is a list of sensation words, and we'll actually first demonstrate this with a little example, and we'll invite the audience to do it with us. We'll invite you to rub your hands together really quickly. All right, pull your hands apart. What sensations do you notice?
Feel warmth and tingling.
Warmth and tingling.
I feel a throbbing, but it's not a painful, maybe it's tingling.
Tingling, throbbing, vibration. I feel some calluses, a little rough texture here, smooth. Lots of different sensations, but also lots of similar sensations because we all have a nervous system. So this is, again, just a short list of potential sensation words that we can use to describe as we learn wellness skills. So the first skill, tracking, is all about noticing sensations happening in the body at the present moment. So not sensations that I felt yesterday, sensations I may feel tomorrow, but right now, what sensations do I notice? And then we have to qualify those sensations. Are they pleasant? Are they unpleasant? Or are the sensations neutral? Now, because this is a wellness approach and it's not a therapy level model, we only invite individuals to track pleasant or neutral sensations. Sometimes tracking or noticing unpleasant sensations may actually send us outside of our zone. So we track pleasant or neutral sensations, and then we just kind of notice. We sit with those pleasant or neutral sensations for about 15 to 20 seconds. This helps to increase our awareness of our nervous system and where we are in the present moment. We do have a caution, as we do with many of our skills, but this one is especially important. As we are thinking about that new portal of awareness, focusing on body sensations, we know that sensing even pleasant or neutral sensations or unpleasant sensations may be uncomfortable for individuals. And so practicing these wellness skills are always a choice. And if they don't work, there are many other wellness skills and approaches that may be more appropriate. But we also always like to offer the invitation that we can practice these skills or not. Priya?
So this is an exercise that we like to do to explain tracking. We're not going to have time to do it today, but I will explain it so that you can do this exercise on your own at home. So what this does is we're taking our food, whatever snacks that we have, and we're slowing down how we experience them. We want to use all of our senses. So we want to look at it, we want to hear it, we want to feel it, we want to smell it, and then we want to taste it. And then while we're going through, we're just trying to determine what is the color of it, what's the sound, what texture does it have, any, what smell does it have, and what taste does it have. Now, once we've done all of this, remember that we're tracking throughout all of it. So see if your food choice has changed anything about your body. Do you notice any sort of pleasant or neutral sensations coming up in your body? Can you stick with them? And you can do the same practice with just an object, ignoring the taste at the bottom. You can just look at it, you can hear it, touch it, and smell it without putting it in your mouth. So even if you're not able to eat at the moment, you can still experience this tracking exercise.
All right, so skill 2 is resourcing. Again, tracking is used with resourcing as well. A resource is any person, place, thing, memory, or part of yourself that makes you feel calm, pleasant, peaceful, strong, or resilient. One of the best ways to learn tracking and to expand that skill is through resourcing. And so resourcing is not just a happy place that we identify. We can think of even a past memory, or we could think about a place that we like to go. Maybe it's taking a walk outside or going to the pond, as we see these two kiddos doing. But when we get to that place, or when we are with that person, we can track our nervous system. What is it about this person who's my resource? What does it do to my nervous system? Well, when I have conversations with this person, my heart rate slows down. My breathing feels steady. My muscles relax. I feel a pleasant sensation of warmth in my chest. So I'm tracking my nervous system through a resource. So when we look at these kiddos in this picture, there are many sensory details in this image. And one thing that we often do as we are practicing resourcing, we ask questions like, what might be pleasant for the people in this photo? Oftentimes we hear responses like the water, the fish, the coolness of the water, the warmth of the sun, the texture of the crops, or the texture of the leather versus the jean hat, the companionship, just being out and exploring nature. So in this particular image, we have a place, we have a person, and there's even a thing that these kiddos are doing. Now, we can also use our sensory language to help us expand that resource. So resource is all about identifying a person, place, or thing, and then tracking our nervous system. So I'm sure many of you may have had the opportunity to meet perhaps a Moana, a Black Panther, a Superman, a Spider-Man, maybe even a baby shark. Okay, I happen to see quite a few of them in my work at daycares. But we know that, especially with children, resources can be imagined. They can imagine themselves as a superhero, and that may be a resource for them. Even as an adult, I may imagine that I'm not at home in Atlanta, I'm actually on the beach as I'm delivering this presentation, right? And I can track my nervous system and check in. Well, what do I notice right here in the present moment as I think about possibly being on the beach? So a resource can be real or imagined. It can be internal or external. So here's an example of how we can practice the skill of resourcing. You may decide to make a resource, draw your resource, or even journal your resource. These are activities that many of us do already. So the only addition here, because we're talking about the nervous system and the resilient zone, is we track our nervous system. As I journal my resource, do I notice any pleasant or neutral sensations? And then notice those sensations for about 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds.
I want to add that one of my favorite examples of this too is making a resource board. So sort of like a vision board, but instead of when you go through the magazine and cut out different pictures and things, it's just things that bring you resilience that you can see yourself having as a resource.
Yes, that's an excellent example. Skill 3 is grounding. Now we hear many people who say that I already know this wellness skill. And so we always ask, do you track your nervous system while you're grounding? So grounding is the direct contact of the body or part of the body with something that provides support in the present moment. So one simple way of thinking about grounding is it has a lot to do with gravitational security. The best example I can give is when I'm on a plane and the turbulence starts, I feel very gravitationally insecure, right? So when I'm planted on the ground, when I feel connected to the earth, or I'm sitting in a chair and it's providing support, I feel grounded. And I can also check in with my nervous system. Why does this chair make me feel supported? Perhaps it is pleasant to have my feet swinging or have my feet on the ground, or to notice that the chair is supporting my back. I'm grounded in the present moment. I'm not worried about the past or the future. Bria?
So when we ground, we can do this in any position, and it's anything that is supporting you. So you can be laying in a pool of water and noticing the water surrounding you and holding you up, and that will be enough. The whole point is to just let your body know that you are in a safe place. You don't have to worry about where you are as far as your physical security on the ground. We've heard of nurses grounding whilst leaning against walls, just touching the wall itself, or even grounding on their clothing, noticing their scrubs holding them. Or if you are a police officer or someone who has to go into a dangerous situation, maybe you're a firefighter, noticing the security of your gear, the protective gear that keeps you safe when you have to go in and help other people. So these are all things that can help ground us in the present moment and that we pay attention to help increase our gravitational security. Slide. So these are our directions for grounding when we go through the exercise. So we find a comfortable position. It can be any position whatsoever, eyes open or closed, just whatever is best for you. And we scan through our body, head to toe, becoming aware of any pleasant or neutral sensations inside of your body, knowing that whatever you pay attention to is going to grow. So we really want to stick with those pleasant or neutral sensations. If we become aware of any uncomfortable sensations, we attempt to bring our attention back to a place that feels more neutral or comfortable. If I notice that my leg hurts, what about my nose? What about my ears? What about my fingers or my toes? Is there some place in my body that I can focus my attention to, some connection that my body might be making to something? to help bring me back into the present moment. So we're not worrying about things that are coming up in the future or anything that has happened in the past. We're just spending some moments noticing sensations that are pleasant or neutral.
So this is the final skill that we'll have time to cover during this brief overview, but that's Help Now. And Help Now is a set of wellness skills for those really heightened moments of distress, when I really find myself bumped in the high zone or bumped in the low zone. Now, this is a poster, and it can be ordered by going to the Trauma Resource Institute's website. And so this poster has a list of 10 skills that can be used during those heightened moments of distress. Many of these skills help to kick on the brake of the nervous system. They may also help us to bring our thinking brain back online. The thing that's important about these wellness skills is we can try a few, because not all of them will work. Again, it depends on the situation and the circumstance. But these are really quick action skills that we can use to try and get our 3 parts of our brain back online as best we can. So that was a very brief overview of the Community Resiliency Model wellness skills. Now, there are more skills that we have not had the opportunity to cover. However, there is an app. Now, I may sound like a marketer in just a second, but we invite you to download the iChill app. It is available in both English as well as Spanish. Bria has put a link to it in the chat box. It can also be accessed on the web at iChillat.com. This iChill app will introduce you and reintroduce you to the wellness skills that we just lightly touched on today. It also includes many of the resiliency images that we presented. We really encourage you to download it and use it as a tool for wellness and also for cultivating compassion. So here's the summary. As we learn CRIM wellness skills, we understand that many reactions to stress and trauma cannot be talked away. That would be our thinking brain. But perhaps they can be sensed away by using wellness skills that help us to balance our nervous system. When we introduce this model, oftentimes individuals begin to learn that their symptoms in the high zone or the low zone are biology, not mental weakness. This often provides a sense of relief that this is just a common reaction to stress and trauma, and I can use wellness skills that may help to expand my resilience zone, even if just for a moment. Now, earlier we talked about common reactions to stress and trauma, but there are also common reactions connected to our well-being. So we have spent more than 2 years at this point pushing through the pandemic. But perhaps we're finding that we found new strength and courage to get through really difficult times. Here at Compassion Con, we're coming together with a joint purpose. Perhaps we are advocating for others. We've increased our faith and our wisdom. Maybe we've even experienced a personal transformation. So Resilient Georgia, as I mentioned earlier, is very committed to addressing adverse childhood experiences and also those positive childhood experiences that help us to become more resilient. So what we know is that adversity is not destiny. We can cultivate compassion. The community resiliency model is just one set of tools out of many tools. And so we invite you again to view the app and just try it and see if it works. So the next step, of course, is to consider putting on your resiliency mask first. Practice the skills for compassionate self-care. As you practice it, as you become more familiar and more comfortable with the skills, we of course invite you to share the wellness model with friends, family, colleagues, even people that you may meet at the grocery store or in your neighborhood on those walks. All right, and with that, I think we have about 3 minutes for any final questions from the audience.
I have a question. I feel like we learned wonderful, amazing, information that we all need to be reminded of every day, all day. And it was very well done. I wonder why you call it a community model, because to me, it's the individual choice. Now, I get that if we're all doing it, it creates more amazing community, but why community if there's something behind that?
Yes, that's a really excellent question. And it's this recognition that to build communities, to strengthen communities, we have to start with self. So we start with one individual at a time. And just as CRIM was introduced in Georgia by one individual about 6 years ago, Dr. Linda Grabby, she was our first CRIM teacher in the state. And since that time, we have more than 70 certified CRIM teachers. And so it has spread like wildfire. The Resilient Georgia grantee coalitions are very excited about this model. And so we started with one individual, and now we are building a community using these community resiliency model skills. So community is the goal, but we have to start with the individual.
These skills are also really meant for it to be shared. It's an each one teach one sort of model. So when we cultivate this self-compassion, it almost feels impossible for that to stay with just yourself, because we are communal creatures. We share not only our stories, but our neurons. We have mirror neurons. So when you experience someone else going through trauma or stress, you take on a little bit of that, just by nature of us both being human. I can't hear your tragic story without some brain cells in my brain like firing in maybe a little bit of an unpleasant way. But these skills can help transform, can help us stay basically in our resilient zone and pull other people into their resilient zones through community. Through, if I can stay calm, if I can stay in my resilience zone, when you're struggling, I can be an anchor for you. My mirror neurons will help your brain settle back into where it's supposed to be by me staying calm. So it's sort of like we're building the community with this.
Yes.
That's beautiful. I love that. It's kind of like when I was in college, at University of Maryland, I had to walk up a hill to get to one of my classes, and people didn't, say hello and everything. So I did this little experiment that if I smiled at people, who would smile back? And it was quite amazing that when I smiled at people, they smiled back. And I think that this same model is, how can we, put on our oxygen mask first, right? We have to do that first. We have to care for ourselves. We have to figure out those triggers. And we didn't talk a lot about breathing, I don't think, but breathing is one of the things that for me is maybe one of my, I guess it would be a resource, or grounding. I don't know which one, but just take a breath, just stop the negative thoughts and okay, that changes everything. Iabo and I sometimes do that together when we're having a moment. We're like, okay, 3 breaths in and out. But I love everything you've taught us today. I am so grateful. I'm really glad that we recorded this, because I think that we can share it with a lot of folks. I know there are a lot of teachers who would love to get this and learn about it. I would love to know, again, you had that poster up about Help Now.
Yes.
Tell me again where that's from.
That's from the Trauma Resource Institute.
Okay.
And Bria has the link and she can put that in the chat box.
Great. So I want to thank you for being part of Compassion Con. I mean, you named it so well. This is what we're all about, right? How do we support one another? How do we uplift one another? How do we put positive messages out there? And just really, really grateful for you both and for everybody who's watching and part of this. We thank you, because we're building resiliency together. And thank you to Resilient Georgia. I mean, just an amazing network of beautiful people doing amazing things in this world. So we all need to support each other, hold each other up. And I'm grateful for you both.
Thank you, Leanne. And thank you for all who attended.
Yes, thank you for being with us today.
Have a good one.